Hello, fifth graders, and welcome to today's language arts lesson. For today, you will need your copy of Gilgamesh and paper and a pencil if you are writing down answers as you go. If you need to pause, go do so, and then come on back and join us. So first thing first, we're going to take a look at our most recent homework assignment and talk about the answers. So number 1 for the Bread of Sorrow. What did Utnapishtim challenge Gilgamesh to do? The correct answer was that Utnapishtim challenged Gilgamesh to stay awake for 7 days. 2. Why did Utnapishtim give Gilgamesh this challenge? The correct answer here was that Utnapishtim gave Gilgamesh this challenge because that's what Utnapishtim did to gain eternal life when he was steering the ship for 7 days and 7 nights. What did Utnapishtim say the loaves of bread are like? Correct answer was that Utnapishtim said the loaves of bread are like the life of a human. Okay, and he talks a little bit about how at the beginning it's fresh and warm and new. Little by little, it becomes more and more brittle. 4a, according to Utnapishtim, why is the rainbow beautiful? Correct answer was that according to Utnapishtim, the rainbow is beautiful because it is short-lived. This is a little bit more of your own reflection, but based on these thoughts about the rainbow, what might the author want readers to think about human life? And again, restating that entire question. Based on these thoughts about the rainbow, the author might want readers to think that human life is beautiful because it doesn't last forever, for instance. That's just one potential idea, and I saw a lot of really great answers from a lot of people. 5, why did Utnapishtim get upset with Gilgamesh at the end of the chapter? We would say Utnapishtim was upset with Gilgamesh at the end of the chapter because he was ungrateful and unmannerly. And finally, which of the following sentences correctly uses the word gratitude? You should have had, the family showed gratitude for the meals brought to their home by friends. So fifth graders, for today, our objective says that we're going to be considering more change in Gilgamesh. And at this point, we're not going to be looking at physical change for him, but instead we're going to be looking at how has he changed in terms of his character. So for today's questions, number 1 asks, why was it so difficult to hold Old Man Young? 2, what does Gilgamesh hope that the gods will say after they see the deeds that he plans to do? 3, what tragic event happened to Gilgamesh at the end of the chapter? Foreshadowing. 4a, in this chapter, Gilgamesh begins thinking of the needs of others. This is part of what relates directly to our objective. What is one quote that shows that Gilgamesh is thinking about the needs of another person? So we would express that answer saying, one quote that shows that Gilgamesh is thinking about the needs of another person is, and then finish with a quote. And 4b is asking you for a second quote. So you would say a second quote that shows that Gilgamesh is thinking about the needs of another person is. Finally, you're going to write actually, I shouldn't say finally, there's another one. 5, write a vocabulary sentence following the vocab sentence expectations using the words compensation, like repayment. Usually we would say you give compensation to someone or receive compensation. So you give payment or receive payment, and repayment, like payment for something you've done. And finally, I've discussed this with you quite a few times in the videos. So those of you who have been watching the videos should see what is the central problem with the story. I've talked about it, I think, 3 different times in my videos. Okay, so make sure, and fifth graders, I can kind of see, I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm able to see kind of how long my videos are being watched. And so I can tell for a lot of you that you're watching some of it, but not all of it. You're not finishing the videos. And so you want to make sure you're watching these videos because there's a lot of information in here. I'm talking about things, I'm giving pieces of information, I'm sometimes giving answers to questions. So for number 6, I hope that you're feeling confident, because if you've been watching these videos of mine, then I've talked about it probably 3 different times in the course of these videos, okay? So, fifth graders, we're going to get into chapter 10, the plant of life. Again, following along with me, your eyes should be on the page, reading with me. The plant of life. I shan't use it first myself, Gilgamesh told the ferryman. He sat on the sluice gates, tying rocks to his ankles with cords from the ferry's rigging. I shall give it to the old men of Uruk and see them grow young again before my eyes. That has me thinking about something. Imagine all the wisdom of old age in the body of a young man. Uruk will be the greatest city on all the plains of the world. The rocks scraped the skin from his ankle bones, but he hardly noticed. So intent was he on finding the prickly plant. At the mouth of the nearby river stood a reservoir of fresh water. You must lift the sluice gate and let the outrush of water carry you out to sea, said the ferryman. Those rocks will keep you from bobbing up to the surface too soon. He would have to hold his breath all the time. He was not a swimming sort of man, and envied now the little boys he had seen in Uruk leaping into the Euphrates for the sheer fun of it. The sluice gates were hard to lift, but suddenly the pent up water inside was surging out to sea, filling his lungs so full he felt them bulge through his ribs. Gilgamesh dropped off the gate and into the racing torrent. The cold clamped round his ribs and forced out half the air he had breathed in. The current turned him over and over, the rocks tied to his ankles banging about him, bruising his head and body and legs. He no longer knew which way up he was, which way to struggle for air. He opened his clenched eyes and saw only the swirling sand and the bubbles jarred from his own nose and mouth. He peered ahead, hand clapped over nose and mouth, trying to keep the air in his chest. Gradually, the water became clear, the current behind him weakening. Then the tide rip struck him like a battering ram. And there it was on the seabed, a dark green snaggle of leaves and spiky stalks. Not another plant grew in the strong current. Only this plant was too well rooted to be dislodged. He would have only one chance. If he failed to grasp the plant, he would be swept on by and lose it forever. He scuffed his feet, elbows, knees against the seabed in an attempt to slow down, then reached out and grabbed the plant with both fists. It was nettle and briar and cactus in one. The pain was so intense that he thought the plant must be on fire, his hands burning. He opened his mouth to yell, and the sea rushed in. But he did not let go. He fumbled left handed at the knots tying the rocks to his ankles. They were swollen, impacted, and would not undo. They would hold him down below water while the breath in his lungs dissolved and he drowned. High above him, the sunny surface was a myriad golden ghouls shimmering and shoaling. He picked up one of the rocks and sliced at the rope with it, all the while holding fast to the fabulous plant with its bristles and spines and venomous hairs. His lungs flattened inside him like goatskin flagons emptied of wine. Blackness ringed his vision. If he let go, he might yet live. Then one foot was free, and the loop of the second was slipping over his heel. He set both feet to the seabed, pushed with all his might, and wrenched the plant out of the ocean floor. He was not sure how he reached the surface. His whole head, his very lungs seemed to be filled with seawater, and yet he burst through, brandishing the plant high above his head. Choking and spluttering, he instantly began to kick his legs and drag the water aside with his left hand. But his right kept tight hold on the blazing agony, the precious weed that would restore his youth and the youth of all the old men of Uruk. His sense of triumph was immense. Not since Enkidu fought at his side, not since the bull of heaven had crashed to earth at his feet, had Gilgamesh felt a joy like it. Like red-hot needles, the plant's bristling spines pierced and cut his palm, but he could bear any amount of pain. The fear which had cramped in his stomach ever since Enkidu's death was gone at last. Not immortal, perhaps, but young again and full of vigor. Gilgamesh would soon feel the life course through him like meltwater down a dried up riverbed. He would have time and strength enough to do such deeds as would make the gods relent and say, "Look, look at Gilgamesh. Shall such a man die? Never." Gilgamesh trod water. The waves shouldered and shoved him. He could not see the shore. He had used up all his strength in picking the plant. What if the current was sweeping him out to sea? What if it washed him out as far as the river of death? What good would the plant be to him then? Then he rolled over, and to his inexpressible joy, he saw a snake headed prow rearing up out of a golden bow wave. As Urshanabi pulled him aboard, Gilgamesh prattled and babbled like a little boy. He whirled Urshanabi about in a wild, wet dance, and Urshanabi laughed and struggled, nodded and danced. He had grown fond of the impetuous king of Uruk. Suddenly, Gilgamesh wanted very much to be home in Uruk. This is the first time that Gilgamesh has thought about home since he left on this journey. The first moment when he thought, I kind of miss home. To tell his mother, to see his shady rooms again, to know how the rebuilding work was progressing. He should not have left his people in time of drought. Was that any way for the father of his people to behave? Suddenly he stopped dancing. Urshanabi, what have I done to you? I've robbed you of your livelihood. I've put you out of favor with the gods. Urshanabi shrugged. Come home with me, Urshanabi. Come back to Uruk. The Euphrates is no sea, but at least the spray of it can't kill you. Come with me. There's no place in the world like Uruk. As the two men sailed back over the ocean, the seawater dried on Gilgamesh and left him salt-caked and uncomfortable. Brown blood caked his hands and arms from where he had grasped the plant, and his hair was seeded with saltwater prawns. He felt less like a king than a sardine drying in the sun. After they had walked 30 leagues, he spotted a deep, cool lake and decided to bathe. He set the plant down on a flat rock and immersed himself in the cool water. His gray hair spread out around his face as he floated on his back, looking up at the sky. Soon he would be wearing linen again and eating stoned olives and taking a glass of wine on the sill of his room in the Uruk palace. He would offer up sacrifices, making things right with the gods. He would ask their blessing on the people of his city, then summon the masons to carve this latest adventure on the bare wall, the fights, the victories, the achievements. He would give Urshanabi some post in government as compensation for what he had lost. There's that word, as repayment. He would give him compensation. Poor man. To think I caused his banishment. He thought of Siduri, the wine seller on the seashore, and how pleased she had been when he called on his journey to show her the plant. Even so, she had repeated her advice. Take a wife. You think a bit of greenery makes you happy? It's nothing in comparison with a child. The cool, clean water crept in at his ears and the corners of his mouth and eyes. He was very happy. There were good people in the world, more than he had thought. Glancing towards the rock, he saw the green plant, a tatter of thorns and spines. He saw the snake, too, of no great size, just a common snake. It slithered out of a crevice, tasting a peculiar scent on the air with its quivering, forked tongue. No! It crossed the rock in a twinkling, unhinged its jaws, and swallowed the plant, insensitive to pain. No, no, no! At once its dull mantle of scales split from end to end, and a new snake emerged, shining and brightly colored. Then it was gone, leaving behind the transparent husk of its sloughed skin, leaving behind its old age. Not a stem, not a leaf, not a bristle or a thorn remained of the plant called Old Man Young, and all its magic, every twinkle and shimmer, was gone too, down into a snake's belly. Oh, after all that, fifth graders. So we have our questions for homework. I actually love the end of this chapter as something to plot. So that's something in terms of dramatic story arcs. It's something to kind of keep in the back of your mind as we move forward. Um, but after all of this, right? I hope you noticed though, as we were reading this chapter, considering a change, more change in Gilgamesh, and really related to the amount that he's considering. There's a lot of consideration that's going throughout this chapter and thinking of how his actions have affected other people negatively, right? And how maybe he should have been behaving in a different way. So he starts to have a little bit more awareness of how his behavior affects other people. So you're going to show me two quotes that show that in this chapter, as well as our other questions. If you have questions, fifth graders, of course, ask me for help, but good luck.